I love the industry because there's so many rebels. There's so many people who have chosen this path. And with any path you choose, there's always going to be choices. And there's always going to be trade-offs. And we've talked about the trade-offs in the past. And so like that trade-off mentality of something is never going to be 100% perfect, but what is the trade-off you're willing to make? So are you somebody who really needs stability and low risk, and you are just looking to go in every day, do your job, go home? Then maybe cannabis is not for you. Maybe there's a very established industry, pharma, or some industry that's been on for hundreds of years, oils and gas. I'm not going to pinpoint any of them, but it's just companies and structure and systems, and you follow the system and you follow the system and you follow, and if that breeze ride, amazing, go there. But that's not cannabis. And then I get the other side of it where I see a lot of people in cannabis who have these amazing minds, and they think and they build and they challenge, and we're rebels and we think outside the box and we're builders. I've had many conversations about builders in the last little while, and looking at the Peter Thiel 0 to 1 concept and how do we look at that mindset. And there's so many people in our industry who have that mindset. We've always thought outside the box.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Cannabis Accounting Podcast. Today I have with me my good friend Stephanie Pow, the founder and head of global talent and growth with Emerald Lane Recruitment. She's based out of Canada and has been recruiting in the cannabis industry, helping grow a couple of different markets. So many so that I can't keep track of them all. So I'll kick it over to you, Stephanie, to introduce yourself to the audience.
Fantastic. Hi, Ray. So lovely to join you. Thanks for the opportunity to share my story and some of the things I've learned along the way in this industry. Hello, everyone. I'm Stephanie Pow. I am the founder of Emerald Lane Recruitment. We are a global recruitment and human capital advisory firm that works right now across 12 global markets. It's been really exciting to work niche in the cannabis space specifically, but really look at the global expansion. And US friends, that includes you as well. We've worked north, south, east, west, and really continue to expand across the US as each state takes on the supply chain itself. But myself, my background, I started my career in corporate. So I actually have a degree in public health, and I started working for the federal government. I thought I wanted to really focus on healthcare. And so I did development and policy at the federal healthcare level in Canada. Then I moved down to the provincial level, where I focused exclusively across cancer management, chemotherapy, stem cell transplants, saw how pharmaceutical drugs were approved and paid for within our medical system, and the cost and the impact on people on the ground. Decided that government wasn't for me because I didn't agree with having to be in an office from 8:30 to 4:30 every day. And so I moved over to nonprofit. I worked with the biggest breast cancer foundation and research group in Canada, implementing their national grant program. So again, seeing how patient care and how medicines and treatments are being funded for the patient, got fairly disenchanted because I felt like pharma was so deeply entrenched and wanted an alternative model. And so at that time, I pivoted out of government, and also decided I wanted to be a digital nomad. So that led me to a few years of working contract work, where I worked actually in the finance and global foreign exchange industries, working with some of the biggest companies in the world alongside the executive teams to really understand how their global business works and ensure that those executives could achieve what they were out to achieve and the business measures. One of the companies sold for $250 million the year after I left. So super exciting to sit at the right hand of some of those executives. And those two sort of combinations came from the healthcare and health and alternative health, and looking at big global business. I went into the world and was trying to figure out where I go next. And a chance encounter in Costa Rica in 2016 had me invited to go to Humboldt County and to explore Northern California. And I took a pivot 10 years ago, ended up saying yes, ended up in North California, up in the hills, and really got a chance to discover the cannabis plant, got to understand the market there, understand the framework, understand how the plant was grown and how it was getting to the patients. And it was a very transformative couple of years of my life, probably for a deeper podcast or maybe a different podcast, and ended up in Humboldt County. And those experiences brought me back to Canada in 2018. Canada legalized for adult use in October of that year. And I joined one of the first recruiting firms. I met the founder at a conference and told her about my experience in Northern California. She invited me to take a jump onto her team. I said yes. I'd never done recruiting. I was in my mid-30s. I'd never done HR. I was like, I think I can do this. And so ended up joining her team. And from that, was one of the first pioneers in the Canadian market. We basically built most of the Canadian market from coast to coast in the billion-dollar years. So definitely some deeper stories from those years. And with that, we had a lot of global notoriety. So back in 2019, 2020, we were recruiting in a lot of the global markets. My team was recruiting in Uruguay, Argentina, USA, UK, and then I was recruiting directly in Denmark, Switzerland, Portugal. So we were really at the forefront of the development of the international supply chain and the European medical markets. And from there, I went on to found Emerald. We're just in our third year now. And from here, we've worked across 12 countries. I continue to live on the ground. I'm on the conference circuit. I'm deeply embedded in the industry, truly committed to the people part. And I think we have enough data and lessons from all the years for me, 7 years, 10 years in the industry, that we can now bring that into our clients and the customers we're serving and really support the people and the talent aspect of companies, understanding how much of an impact they have on profit and plants and the industry as a whole.
Nice. I appreciate that breakdown. Yes, definitely a lot of interesting side quests we could have whole podcasts about. We'll get there hopefully over the next years as we're serving this industry for time to come, because we're still growing. But yeah, you brought up a good point, good segue. So getting started in those early years, 2019 to starting recruiting all the way through to 2026, what were some of the business thesis or early day mindsets starting out in 2019? And then how have those changed to 2026 from on the recruiting, the talent side, and the people part of the cannabis industry as far as, mindset around recruiting?
That's a really great question. So again, when I entered, I started having conversations in 2018 in the Canadian market and then formally entered in 2019. So we were a year and a bit into adult use legalization in Canada. And at that time, still the billions. So there was so much money flowing in. There had been so much money coming in. These companies were opening massive facilities, huge teams, making sure that every detail, the org charts were very stacked, lots of people, big build, do. And so it was like this very rapid growth, but then it was just like tons of people and tons of budget. And so we just like really started throwing everybody at it and bringing in experts from all different types of industries, as well as the legacy folks and those who actually do the plant, and really mashing them together in these companies to really bring things forward into this place that we didn't actually know. We hadn't really had the consumer data. We were hopeful. We used you could look at some other countries or other states, the more mature US markets for some data, but we really didn't know what was going to happen. And then fast forward 9 months, COVID also hit, and nobody knew they were going to have a global pandemic. And Canada did lockdowns for almost 3 years. So although we were deemed an essential service, it definitely created an impact in terms of what that looked like from a talent perspective, lifestyle perspective, and what that meant for these organizations. We also had retail rollout challenges in different provinces, which states doing different things in Canada. So we definitely saw a lot. And so that was one of the trends, I guess, if I can think back, is like, if I think back of some of the big LPs or the publicly traded companies, they were immediately hundreds or thousands of employees. And so someone joins their marketing team. There'd be so many layers within the marketing team. You'd have graphic designers and you'd have marketing, you'd have brand people. So you'd have these massive departments. And so now forward to 2026, and what we've seen, now I see a marketing department of maybe one. And then they have an agency partner, or they outsource some of their work, or they might have a couple of key roles, but they're not having these massive teams. It's still, now we're back to that like lean, scrappy startup industry. Although some facilities, looking at size and scope, especially in the US, as some of the facilities, they do have to have hundreds, if not thousands of people within their rosters, especially MSOs and those working across various countries and some of the Canadian larger LPs. But at the same time, there definitely is a niching down of the employees, definitely a leaner team that we're seeing, a leaner structure, and really that startup mentality where you have to know your stuff, but you also have to be willing to learn, roll up your sleeves, and just pull whatever hat out of your hat box that they need you to have that day. And there's none of this, it's not my job. It's just really about this, let's jump in. So I am seeing a lot of that startup. And then when we look at the European markets, definitely lean teams, like incredibly lean, very efficient, and really bringing in a lot of business best practices that come from adjacent industries and also are then translated as needed into the cannabis industry. But we are seeing a lot of translation for those best practices in other corporations and other industries that are coming into cannabis and are becoming more and more enfolded into talent and what we see from a human capital and talent perspective.
Awesome. No, like the walk down from early days to what we're up to nowadays. And it makes a lot of sense. The kind of the lean team is just really specialized. At first it was trying to find people with cannabis knowledge or cannabis industry knowledge. And now that the companies are becoming more sophisticated, they've been around 3, 5, 8+ years. It's okay, who just knows manufacturing Six Sigma really well and is willing to take what they learned in oil and gas and now work with this cannabis company, but they're still really good at that thing. And that kind of leads me to another question. But before I get to that one, let's talk Emerald Lane Recruitment. So when you started the business, you're a founder, what did you want to do differently with your business that made you want to start it? Most people, when they want to start a business, especially if it's something that they did for a number of years, they see the gaps. And so they're like, okay, if I started a business, it would be this, it would be for me accounting, it would be accounting, but instead of just worrying about insurance and tax, we're actually going to do the accounting and financial reporting. So I feel like you need those to do the accounting and tax anyways. So that was my aha moment. But what was your aha moment with Emerald Lane Recruitment, and how would you say, what do you guys do differently?
That's a really good question. Yes, I was part of a small firm when I first joined the industry in recruiting. I was there for almost 3 years, and we're small and mighty and did some amazing work. And there were some practices from that I really saw be effective and efficient. We were definitely deeply embedded into the Canadian landscape. Obviously, COVID made it so we couldn't be as on the ground in other regions, but we definitely were deeply embedded in the Canadian side. And so when I transitioned out of that company, I had an opportunity to consult with another group doing this and got to understand how they approached it. And I was going through the process and just thought, no, I think we still need more of that emphasis on the human capital side. For me, I've always really cared about people. I love meeting people. I was a free child with older parents who traveled a lot when I was a kid, and we'd had a boat, we'd pull up our boat to whatever marina we were sleeping in that night. And my parents would be like, go make friends. And so that was my whole life, was just getting to know kids and getting to be around people and hear their stories and talk to them. It's something I love so deeply. I think that really understanding that people aspect was something I wanted to do differently just on our end. I also want to look at how we look at talent within the cannabis industry. So we have seen some of the big players try to come in over the years, and some of them still dabble here and there, but a lot of them just ultimately were not accepted or embraced by the industry because they were just too corporate or too professional. Their pricing was not necessarily aligned with our industry, or they just didn't have the database, or they were sending candidates that just didn't understand the plant or care about the plant, or weren't able to adjust and adapt to this wild startup industry that pivots and changes every day. We wanted to really become that cannabis specialist kind of organization and really look at how do we get really good at cannabis? How do we make sure our database, our talent, the way we lend everything is fully in cannabis? The number of people that have asked me if I want to do psychedelics, and my response is we don't do biotech. Because to me, psychedelics is a biotech industry. I could go there. There's some temptation. Biotech's also a bit of a dicey, unpredictable industry, given the regulatory framework and blah, 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 and that human trials. But for us, really getting good at cannabis and understanding it. So that's what our team eats, sleeps, breathes. Anyone who's worked for my team comes from the cannabis industry, has done human stuff, or has a human forward mindset or perspective. But we really look at that from a cannabis specific perspective. And the other thing is just see this as my competitors. So it's not to be that they're not there. I just still think there's such a need for care and concern and support for the candidate side. This is a big deal for people to be looking for a job and to be moving through careers, keep our food on our table and feed our families and keep a roof over our head and give us purpose. And so I don't take my job lightly at all. And I really make sure that we embed that deeply in how we treat our candidates. Confidentiality, authenticity, honesty. Are we perfect? No, but that's something that I really wanted to and then chose to lead with Emerald. So that was from a high level perspective. And then the other thing is pricing and pricing models. I feel like a lot of, just like many parts of the industry, they took something from another industry, brought it in. And so when we look at how when I joined the industry, with billions, it didn't matter. We get a call from the pub code. They say, hey, we need 20 rolls, 10 rolls, 15 rolls. Doesn't matter how much it costs, money. And which I wish I was in those years. Here we are, different years. And so for us, a lot of the things we hear is people don't have the budget. That's why they don't have internal talent acquisition teams. That's why they don't have internal HR. That's why they don't have CHROs or the talent needs. So it's, if we come in at our typical agency pricing, then a lot of groups, there are groups that can pay, and that's where they're at. But we're also, our job as experts and professionals in what we do and service providers is to look at how we optimize what we do. And so for us, something we launched, no example, into the US market, we've just launched this from soft launching, our website's updating, et cetera, is we're offering a fractional recruiter model. Because we understand that companies need to hire, say, that 3 to 10 roles a year, 3 to 12, which is not enough to have a full-time internal TA team, is a lot to put onto an HR team's plate or an executive or internal team hiring, and also can just be a lot for the team as well. And so we can look at that from a flat fee model on a monthly agreement, and then jobs can come up as they come up. And so we're doing that in a much more cost affordable way. And that allows us as a small bootstrapped agency to have our revenue and looking at how we work with clients. And it also allows our clients to have more of that consistency and then agency level support, fraction of the cost. It's been really fun to build and adapt to our market. And I think that's why also I started Emerald. I was like, what can we build? What can we do? For lunch buddy brunch, we're just trying to really just find ways to have fun with it and really do good work, but also adapt and evolve within this global marketplace.
Nice. No, I appreciate that. I've attended a few buddy brunches in the past, doing good, I believe you buy meals or something for the local people based on how many coffees we get purchased. So if you're ever at an event and there's a buddy brunch, I would encourage you to attend. But I like what you said about just focusing on the cannabis industry. Obviously, we share the same business thesis here at Dope CFO. We only serve the cannabis industry, and it allows you to find these very talented people because it is like a niche within a niche within a niche. It's like the startup space because there's other much older companies and industries that are just much more established, like biotech or fintech or just tech in general, software, construction. healthcare. And so it's the startup industry, then it's cannabis. So it's coming out of prohibition. And then it's for you more global supply chains or just specific ones. So yeah, it makes it a little bit easier to find these unicorns, as you call them, for these specific roles. Thinking through one final question on Emerald Lane, I guess actually just bigger picture, just for you're a young founder, you're 3 years in, 4 years into Emerald Lane. Anybody who's been watching has seen the continued growth, the consistent growth. But what lessons would other young founders starting their business for the first time? The cannabis industry globally is a startup industry, so there's a lot of them.
You write a book. That's all I do a lot on.
I thought about not asking this question, but I was like, but shit's good. She'll think it's something good. What do you got for us, Steph?
Yeah.
No wrong answers on my podcast. We can edit it out if needed. Just kidding.
Be ready. Be ready. It's not for the faint of heart. I think there's a few lessons that most founders will figure out on cannabis or not. One, it's going to take a little longer than you think. So make sure you have runway. This company is 100% bootstrapped. When I started, I had very low credit card access because I had some credit stuff when I was younger. I did this completely on the back, no loans, no rich family, no nothing. It just was all me building it out and having a little more of that runway and being able to understand what you need for you or your family, your lifestyle. So really making sure that you're going to be okay, because if you're in scarcity, if you're worried you're not going to eat, which I can tell you there's moments of that, you're not yourself. And so being able to really realistically understand runway and risk tolerance, I think is super important. Making sure you have a really clear plan on that side. I think also going with something you're really good at, right? That's something you're going to be doing this day in, day out. I still love recruiting. I just got off a call right now, recruiting candidate. I love recruiting. And that's part of my work as founders. I get to spend less time recruiting and more time on the business, which is lovely. But I still some days I just want to hear people's stories. Working in something you love, working on something you deeply understand or passionate about, that can help a lot, because there are going to be long days, there's going to be long nights. There's going to be a real authenticity that people are going to be looking for. And so how do you come through with that? Obviously, if you're going to go into consulting, if we're consultants, I see a lot of people getting into consulting that actually aren't experts. And like, I come from the government side. I worked in government RFPs and contracts. If you're going to say you're a consultant, that means you're like the best at something. That means you're like an expert at something. So be an expert at something. And if you're not, then don't claim to be. Because I see a lot of that in our industry where people claim to be consultants, they claim to be experts, they overemphasize what they've actually done or achieved. And then these companies will hire them to be experts and are not. And ultimately both sides fail. So I think ultimately making sure that you're going into the market or your business idea, understanding what you do, or maybe you're not an expert in opening a cannabis edible facility, but make sure you get the right experts around you, advisors. Take some time, take some diligence. I think that's the other way to look at it. The other thing is, even if you've done this before, so when I started Emerald, I'd already had 4 years in the market of recruiting. I was incredibly well known in Canada. Had video series, 10,000 views. When I went to my first international conference, even though I'd been recruiting on the ground, nobody knew me. They were like, "Who are you?" And I was like, "Oh, I guess I was school in some markets." And so I was welcomed and I was embraced, but I had to show up with a very humble, very aware, like I was a new kid again. And Emerald was new again. And didn't matter what I did before, it matters what I do now. And so that's where I think a lot of people get caught up, especially in our industry. Oh, I did this in this market. That means when I walk into this new market, I'm going to be a star. And you got to prove yourself again and again. So I think that's really about the effort and the energy and the intention you put behind the work you do and anything you're doing. And the other thing is, again, cannabis is not for the faint of heart. So make sure you have good contracts, a good lawyer. Make sure that you know the red flags you're looking out for with the people you work for. Make sure you do your due diligence when you're working for other people or working with other people. And make sure that you're looking under the hood. There's it's hard sometimes, and we've had our own moments, and that's learning lessons I have. But for new founders, consultants, make sure you have really tight contracts. Make sure that you do things professionally. Doesn't matter if it's a friend, doesn't matter if it's your buddy, doesn't matter if it's someone that you've known for a long time. Business is business. And so putting those contracts in place, making sure it's all legitimate, really doing your due diligence as a business owner to make sure that your revenue is coming in, that you're paid fairly, that you're aligned in compliance, and all of those sort of fun back end things. So most of them will just be about setting that foundation so far. I'm in the scale up phase right now of our company and a little startup that could. So now in a year or two from now, I'll have definitely different lessons. But I would say from a startup perspective, those would be the biggest areas I would highlight.
Nice. No, great advice. Great advice. And yeah, you covered the other question too of just, it's the same. You've switched career paths as well. And so not to get there is some advice of considering, because our jobs do bring a lot of meaning to our life. It's this weird thing of trying to, like they totally do. And so yeah, what you do, it's That's very tactical. Obviously, like, all right, how much money am I going to make? What's my cost of living? Can I manage the move? What will they cover? What will I cover? But then past all of the money and once your needs are met and you're not in scarcity, you have a roof over your head, you have, what you need. Then it is, what are we doing and why are we doing it? Who are we doing it with? And I think who are we doing it with is almost trumps why. As long as you're doing good, they just want to be doing it with people you like. But anyway, so moving on, we'll keep it all business here on this podcast. So when switching gears back to recruiting, because you're really good at it, and you talk to so many people. So this was a question that I had. So when recruiting talent from outside of the industry into the industry, because I talk to a lot of external CPAs, CFOs that are like, they have mixed reviews and perceptions of the cannabis industry. But what are some common questions that you get from people outside of the industry that you're recruiting, and bigger picture, how are we perceived externally outside of the cannabis industry? Because we always joke, like, we're in our own little bubble. We know everybody knows everybody, the business, as you know what's going on. But externally, we're a small little industry in a big old world.
Yeah, it's a great question. I might forget the second part first, but like, we're going to have to
talk too
much. Let's say I want to make sure I answer all of it. So yes, as you noted, like, I have, since the day I started, talked to people outside the industry looking to get in, people who are coming into the industry, who might be coming from legacy or gray market, getting into the more the legal side. So these conversations are happening all the time. I think when someone is actively applying, let's go like actively applying versus headhunting, because that can be a little bit different. Yeah. But when someone is like actively applying, a lot of the questions is, we are really giving information on the industry. It's hard to find information. It's very scattered. Again, we don't talk to each other. And so there is a lot of miss or lack of information for candidates. So we're actually doing a lot of education when we speak to our candidates. What is the supply chain? What is possible? What does the market look like right now? What are the companies? What are the competitors? Where are we seeing landscape? What are we finding its success in certain roles or certain aspects? So there's a lot of an education component that we put in. A lot of individuals want to understand if the rumors they heard are true. So maybe they have friends that lost money, or they've had friends that have come and gone with jobs, or they've had family members that have worked in the industry and heard horror stories, or they have families that love it and they want to know everything about it. It's amazing. Is this really the truth? Is this really what it's like? So we really get to dispel myths on both sides and really provide that insight. And then the other thing is, I think some people think the industry is a little further ahead. So they think companies are a little more mature. They think companies have a little more revenue, that we're bigger than we are. And you kind of have to be like, oh, let's talk through this. And I still come back and tell people our whole industry is less than 20 years on the legal side, just over 20, 25 years. So we're still young. We're still very young. And so there's still so much to learn. And there's still a lot of the companies coming online and learning those and going through those toddler steps and going through those growing pains. And so I think anyone coming into industry, painting that picture to them is going to be really true around it. And then people want to understand what they can do. I got a message that says, we're working on a role in Thailand, and we have a job post open so people can see our company. And so I've been having a lot of inbound in my LinkedIn inbox. And I had a guy today say, how do I get into a supply chain role in Thailand? Like, I'm a supply chain expert. What do I do? And so those are very common questions about what is the step into it. And like, I do I don't do as much with Emerald. I'm busy, but when I was a recruiter, I had a coaching and consulting business on the side. And I still do coaching here or there. We have our office hours, do my live hours, which I'll bring back soon because I'd love to have more time to pick my brain. And so those hours, and in that time, a lot of people asked, how do they get in? And so understanding how you dissect a job posting, how you get to know the industry, what events to show up to. And ultimately, a lot of the advice I give people is like, what is your next side step? So if you're a supply chain expert in fast moving consumer goods in Thailand, okay, so what company is really working in supply chain? And that's hard to find, right? When we talk to them or we point them in the right direction. So find some producers, find some manufacturers. Here's how you Google, here's a directory you can go to, right? We try to give them a couple resources. And then find those companies and then see who's doing a lot of supply chain work that would be similar, knowing their fast moving consumer good is a vape or a finished flower product versus a cosmetic or another fast moving consumer good product. And then how do you sidestep in so the title alignment works? And so there's a lot of guessing there. With headhunting, so those are direct applicants or people that reach out to us. When I do a lot of headhunting, I get there's a little more pushback because obviously we're going
those conversations are more interesting. Like, I'm this recruiter. Yes. Like, of course I'll talk with you. But for cannabis.
Yeah, working cannabis. I don't want to work in cannabis. So there is definitely still some stigma. So there's people who have said very clearly, I don't want to work in that industry. I'm not interested. Cool. Stigma is there. It's going to be real. And it can be, the other thing is stigma is not always about the plant. It's not like they're like, oh, I think cannabis is awful and it's bad. It's more, I've heard bad things about the industry. I've heard that there's lots of turnover, not paid well. That's a bit of a cowgirl market. So those sort of reputations do go external as well. So there's people who have had that. Other people might have been through interview processes before and they were like, I had a terrible experience with interview processes, or I got an offer and they rescinded it. So there is these sort of like moments people kind of got burned and they're not necessarily interested. On the other hand, people are curious. So like, what is the cannabis market? What does that look like? What is it possible? What are these facilities like? What are these operations like? Who are you selling to? What's the growth pattern ahead? What does it mean to be in a startup? And so there's just a lot of questions about what it means to work in cannabis. And that can look many ways in terms of the supply chain, right? So there's a lot of, again, education. And I think the biggest gap I continue to see in so many ways is like, we speak very well to each other in the industry, but we're not necessarily speaking out. And so how do we continue to speak out? And from a talent perspective, we're looking at that. How do we continue to bring the best talent into the industry, convince people to bring their expertise into our industry, bring in the top performers to want to bring their expertise into this startup industry? Because we need that. We need new people coming in all the time, especially as talent leaves and as we start to evolve and markets evolve. We need those new people with those specific skill sets. And then how do we actually just continue to break down the stigma, open up walls and open up doors and open up conversations so that people can learn and they can understand really what we're about and we're not just speaking to each other and including each other.
I really appreciate that answer. Your answers are always so thorough. I feel like there's just tons of little nuggets and all these sound bites. But I agree with you. It's interesting where people think the sentiment about the cannabis industry still revolves around the plant and the products, which too it might to some degree, yes, but the majority is mainly just the companies are small, they're not profitable. Why would I want to go work in a struggling startup industry when I could go work for an AI startup? You're like, all right, Jesus. So no, it's interesting, kind of just the questions and the perception of the cannabis industry. We talk with many CPAs and CFOs trying to bring them into our world, and they're a little bit more buttoned up, straight edge on the finance side. So we have some really interesting conversations, especially when we're reaching out to them. But moving on to the next question, because I feel like it's on the recruiting, what we do for a bit, our career matters. We're sleep for 8 hours, we work for 8 hours, and we have family and friends and health and everything for 8 hours. So it's like a half of our waking hours is work and what do we do to earn a living. So it's very important. So you talk with many people that are looking to change careers, looking to change companies. And so I wanted to ask this question from the grass is always greener on the other side perspective. And so human nature is, I think the grass is greener on the other side. The investors in the industry and the owners think, oh, this market, the grass is greener in that market. If I can just get into New York or I can just get into Germany. But the employees think, oh, this other business, I can go from this cultivation company, we'll cultivate for that company, things will be better. Or, oh, if I can just get out of product manufacturing and get into product innovation, it'll be better. So what advice do you have for the greener pasture people, having spoken with so many people in that transitionary period, thinking, go full coach mode?
The grass is greener. There's so many analogies for that for our industry too. So I love it.
And life.
Yes. And life. I think ultimately, and this is maybe me getting into my 40s and learning some wisdom along the way, is like the grass always seems greener no matter where you are in so many ways in life. And then you get there and you realize it's still just grass, right? So it's a matter of understanding and perspective. I think in the cannabis industry, there is this idea that there's a utopia. And I mean, it's fun. So like with Emerald Lane, and on a side tangent is I chose I worked with someone to help us come up with the name of Emerald Lane. But Emerald Lane is a play on the Yellow Brick Road. And if you know the Wizard of Oz story, you know Dorothy is trying to get to the Emerald City because the Emerald City is utopia. And along the way, she gets a brain and she gets a heart and she gets courage. And she keeps going down the Yellow Brick Road towards the Emerald City. And so that's what we're doing in talent, right? We're finding the best of the best and they all get on the Emerald Lane and we're going to the Emerald City. And so that utopia is somewhere we're all trying to go to. And so I think that's sort of human condition that we're all trying to get to that best life, that better life. And was Instagram helping? Absolutely. But I think that with our industry, the reality is we're still just a startup industry everywhere. And I talk to people in every single market and every single market has challenges. Every single market has regulatory hurdles. Every single market has issues with politics. We all are dealing with the macro climates of the globe. We are all dealing with the macro economics and regional nuances and life and technology and evolution and humanness. right? And so there's this idea that one market is going to save another, and it's not. It's just going to be a different type of grass. They're going to have different things they need to keep their grass beautiful. So I think ultimately it comes down to being realistic with yourself. There might be an environment that you're in that's super toxic when it comes to work or a work environment, and that's not right for you. And another opportunity would be fantastic. And it makes more sense for you to go because that brings you balance to your body, mind, and soul, and allows you to be a better person and a better employee and actually reach the milestones and successes in your own career path. So absolutely, that could be a grass screener moment, and that's worth being motivated for and doing the work to get there. I just think there's an idea that one market or another, or one place or another is going to save us. And a lot of the challenges are still there. Again, they just morph a little bit. And so I think it ultimately comes down to being realistic with ourselves. The cool thing about this industry is a lot of people they want to be in startups, right? Like, as I said, I worked for the government, and I remember my first week, 21 years old, I went to my federal government job, and they're like, we start at 8:30. And I was like, what if I want to come in at 9 because I want to go to the gym in the morning? And they're like, no, we don't do that. And I was like, yeah, but I'll work from 9 to 5. Like, half an hour. And they're like, no, we work 8:30 to 4:30. And I was like, but it's half an hour. And I remember thinking like, oh no, my limits. I need to be able to ask questions and like at least push the line a little bit. So I love the industry because there's so many rebels. There's so many people who have chosen this path. And with any path you choose, there's always going to be choices. There's always going to be trade-offs. And we've talked about the trade-offs in the past. And so like that trade-off mentality of something is never going to be 100% perfect, but what is the trade-off you're willing to make? So are you somebody who really needs stability and low risk, and you are just looking to go in every day, do your job, go home? Then maybe cannabis is not for you. Maybe there's a very established industry, pharma, or some industry that's been on for hundreds of years, oils and gas. I'm not going to pinpoint any of them, but it's just companies and structure and systems, and you follow the system and you follow the system and you follow, and is that where you thrive? Amazing. Go there. But that's not cannabis. And then I get the other side of it where I see a lot of people in cannabis who have these amazing minds, and they think and they build and they challenge, and we're rebels and we think outside the box and we're builders. I've had many conversations about builders in the last little while, and looking at the Peter Thiel 0 to 1 concept and how do we look at that mindset. And there's some people in our industry who have that mindset. We've always thought outside the box. And so we come together and work together, but then we thrive in cannabis, right? But then there's some trade-offs there. You're going to have maybe some more turnover with your work. It's not going to be as consistent. You might not get paid as much. It's going to be a little more builder versus doer. And so there's just different ways to look at how that looks within the market. But the reality is there is no utopia. We are all building the Emerald City, and every market is going to have its challenges, and every market's going to have its opportunity. And so those of us who choose to go into these new markets, who choose to take risk, even if you're opening up a new region or a new store, even if you're bringing a new product line online, even if you're evolving something within your own organization that has never been done before, there's just ways to look at that innovation and make it better. And then it comes back to the self-ownership, right? Like, we all have to take ownership for ourselves. And so ultimately too, if you're looking for grass to be greener, are you your greenest? Are you being awesome? Are you authentic? Are you living your truth? Are you doing your best work? Are you welcoming others? Are you being a good human? There's just so many things that we could look at. Are you really getting good at your craft? Are you refining? Are you learning? Are you adapting? So how do you actually show up? And then if you're at your best self, then wherever you go, it's still going to get better, right? And be better. And so there's that self-ownership as well, I think, within that component of grass is greener. And ultimately, as I said, it's all just grass.
It's all just grass. It tastes like grass. No, I appreciate that breakdown. I knew you'd have something good to say. And definitely it is. There's many different ways to think through that. And it does definitely come back to self-ownership and just what do you want in life? There's lots of ways to get there. And it's okay to change your mind as well. But let's not try to just make that a habit, which is, again, it's like the counterintuitive, like the cannabis industry is only going to be built for the first time, one time. And so people like making the decision to get into here is unique, but we don't want to be hopping around too much. That being said, more of just a tactical question, because I love this stuff. So when CEOs and investors are thinking about using a recruiting person to get a specific role filled, definitely I've been there outside of the cannabis industry using recruiters, inside of the cannabis industry using recruiters, because at the end of the day, business is people. Yes, there's products and services that are exchanging for commerce, but it's usually humans talking to humans or people talking to people, all brands and logos and Illuminati aside. But anyways, back to recruiting. So what used to be a lot of CEOs and investors that are looking to expand to new markets or just expand their current footprint? And so what do you wish more of the CEOs and investors asked you or asked recruiters before they started to work with them? Or what do you wish more CEOs and investors thought through when thinking to expand to new markets before engaging with a recruiter?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So obviously we think recruiters and talent acquisition partners and executive search a big support to our industry and to the clients we work for. There's various reasons why that's the case. Oftentimes we're working with small teams that don't necessarily have internal TA or HR functions or don't have somebody's dedicated to recruitment internally. So now they have extension through us. We also have clients and teams that already have existing frameworks, have amazing internal recruiting and HR teams. There might be a niche role, there might be a confidential replacement, there might be a new market their team doesn't necessarily have time in, or one that just takes a lot of headhunting and it's just too much time and demand on the internal teams. So we do work on both sides of that. But I think going back to recruiters and how companies interact with us, on one hand, one of the reasons why I think we're real value add to our clients and the groups we work with is we get a lot of data from the market. When you're doing your own internal search, when you're doing your own applications and you're directly working with candidates, there's always a bit of like performative nature of that. There's always a little bit of like those conversations not necessarily going as deep or becoming as authentic. We become a really safe space for both sides. We become a very transparent partner and strategic ally for both sides, the hiring company and those CEOs and investors, and then the applicants and the candidates on the ground. So we really get to act as this intermediary and pull data from both sides and hear what we're listening to and provide insights and well-roundedness and bounce off ideas on both sides. And then eventually, and as needed, come back to both sides to share that, right? So we get to really become a true partner. So salary compensation data. We have a group we're opening up a new South American market and we're looking at compensation values. And so we were really doing a lot of exercises around compensation and measuring within the market. And they could have probably gone online and looked at it, but we come back and we say, here's what we're thinking. Here's why we think of the reason. We really made a case in terms of the compensation range we think is true. And then we'll go to market. And if we're talking to 10, 20, 30 candidates and they all have a different range or a different number, or they're all asking for something that wasn't necessarily flagged, that's on to us going back to our clients now and saying, hey, we set this target. We're hearing that within the market in order to be competitive. You need to be a few thousand higher, or here we found some really good talent. Here's what they're wanting. And so we can actually provide that insight that allows them to be more competitive and actually align their talent strategy with the market, where they may not hear that directly if they're applying for candidates or interviewing candidates directly. And same with the candidates, right? They get to ask us questions about the clients. They get to ask us about what we've understood. They get to see how they fit within the organizations and how their org charts flow and how their internal culture looks. So we get to also provide some of that insight and provide a safe space for them to bounce those ideas off of. So I really think when it comes to working with our executive teams, we do provide that space in the middle, and we are a very safe space and a very open dialogue space where we get to get some conversations that wouldn't necessarily been on both sides. And that allows us to really make the best match, because when both sides are transparent and clear and can hear each other and have clear data, then they know they can make the best decision for who the right role is, or if it's the right role to go in the company, and vice versa. So I think that would be something that we really want to make sure. The other thing is, like, we're busy. It's cannabis. We're such busy people. Yeah. And so if you're an expert in something, focus on that. You don't have to become an expert in talent. That's what we do. And so let people be experts in the way that they're experts, and then you lean into those experts as well. The cost of a bad hire, there's so many data points, but $14,000 or $20,000, or there's some study that's not necessarily, there's lots of data points. That's a big costly expense to these companies. And so focus on what you're trying to do with that. You're trying to build the plants, you're trying to build your supply chain, you're trying to launch your pharmacy, you're trying to open your dispensary, you're trying to launch your Canatac. Focus on that. Let us really handle the people part, because all of those roles are really critical. And the people, we need to run alongside you. And every time you stop, every time you go through these interview processes, get to the very end, you pick your candidate, the candidate doesn't take the job. Now, all that time, all that effort, it's gone, because a lot of companies don't have time to have that pipeline and have continuous conversations, which is what we do.
Yeah.
There's just so many different ways that we can look at that helpfulness. And ultimately, again, new markets, we bring in new data points, we bring in new networks, and especially in new markets where there isn't known people, or they might have a few relationships. One of my most infamous stories in Europe when I first got on the ground is I was at ICBC, which is coming up very shortly. We'll be there on the ground, and there's an actual set of meetings, and I had a Portuguese operator reach out to me. So I had a meeting with the founder, and they had hired a head grower who had applied, who had come from Canada, said they were the best grower in all of Canada. I asked the person's name. I'd never heard of the person. And ultimately, that executive went on to tell me a horror story of how that person had pretty much destroyed the business, created fraud, had really made a very negative impact on their business, and ultimately had said, if only we'd found you, because I didn't even know how to interview a head grower. We just trusted those persons that they were great. So if you're coming in, and we're seeing a lot of investors and CEOs from outside the industry, we also act like cannabis experts. Like, how to evaluate a head grower if you've never evaluated head grower, right? We're working with clients in Sri Lanka on this. It's so fun, but that's where we come in with our expertise. That's where a true talent partner needs to become a strategic vision. We really work. We're a partner. We're a partnership. We're a professional service provider. We provide professional services. Everything's white glove. Everything's managed. But ultimately, we become the eyes and ears on both sides. And so that is where our huge value added and what I love doing with my clients, because they can't be everywhere and we try to be everywhere. And we're really able to then exchange that data and make sure both sides are informed to make that best hire and ensure that the roles are the right.
Nice. No, I appreciate that answer. And it seems like obvious, but no, as a professional service provider myself, you'd be amazed how many CEOs of investors hire us, but don't ask us for input or feedback of this is the plan, execute it. It's like, I know that's your plan, but like, I know what you want. And like, there's a few different ways to get there. So yeah, lean into your expertise, especially because there is real data out there on hiring mistakes and the cost of that. You're a busy woman, logically so. You're doing good things in the industry. We're good people. But so final question, Steph, and I'll get you out of here in time to get ready for your next call. But you and I will both be at ICBC next week. You're speaking on stage. So just let people know a little bit about what are you talking about? And then also, what are you excited about for the future next 1 to 3 years in the global cannabis industry as we continue to grow this thing?
Yeah. Last year, I think I attended 20 international cannabis conferences. The year before, I think I was 18. This year might be a little less, and I'll be a little more in the US for US friends. But yeah, ICBC is a big one in Berlin. It's my 4th year attending. It's really, truly one of the best in the world. It's a really busy few days. I'll be attending Talmud House as well. And this year, we're one of the sponsors of the water and coffee station. So anytime you caffeinate or hydrate, you will have to say hello to me. And so I will be there for 2 days drinking coffee, hanging out. So we're really excited to be a part of it. Yes, I'm on a conversation on international strategic partnerships. We see talent as a big part of strategic partnerships, not only from a due diligence and discovery perspective, but also in outcome and successes in partnerships. So not only in sort of professional service providers, but how do we actually look at how a company's talent and human capital aspect of their business can really impact and make and break partnerships. And so really excited to contribute to that conversation and really continuing to get on the circuit. I'll be speaking at Ignite It in Chicago as well, looking at talent and how that implements and gets involved into M&A and business. Ultimately, your people are your profits, right? People profit plans is what I've said all along. I know a few groups have those or variations on the P's. Your people are everything. And ultimately, I've seen companies come and go because they couldn't get their people right, and they couldn't get their talent right. And they had challenges and turnover, and reputation sticks with you in this industry, right? As we're growing, as we're all figuring this out, as we're evolving, how and who works for your company, who's a part of your leadership team, what's the skill set they build, what is their reputation, how are they supporting the industry, how are they getting to really be good partners with others. All of these aspects are becoming more and more critical and important. And so as I move across the world and have these conversations, I really want to speak on behalf of the people. I've been recruiting for 7 years. I get to have incredibly amazing conversations all day long with some of the best in the biz and outside the biz. I get to have very candid, deep conversations, my team and I as well. And I get insights that a lot of people don't. And so when I speak, it's not always my knowledge, it's the knowledge I get to gain in those conversations. And I think recruiters are like we have this like secrets, and a lot of it's confidential. I tell everybody I'm a vault. I have so many secrets. I don't tell anyone's secrets, and anyone who's worked with me knows that. But there's still so much wisdom that I get to absorb. And so I'm so excited to go to these conferences and speak. I'm not speaking just on my behalf of myself. I'm speaking on behalf of every person who's on the ground building this industry and really making sure their voices are heard and sharing the best practices and the lessons we've had and the billions that have been spent. What are we learning? What are we adapting? And how are we actually making it better for everybody from the people perspective, from those who choose to work in cannabis, who run businesses in cannabis, and ultimately the patients and the end users that we're trying to get the product to.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. So anybody looking to get a great speaker on stage or pay a great asset to bring you great talent, Stephanie knows all the secrets of the industry. And I was just thinking to myself, like, the most honest person is the person who just left. Or the most honest person is the person thinking about leaving. Having left a CPA firm, having left a Fortune 100 company, like I've been at very prestigious big companies and I've seen turnover happen. It happens at all levels. So no, but all jokes aside, you're a professional. You're providing a very great service for the industry. So just really appreciate what you're doing. Obviously, the impact of what Emerald Lane Recruitment is doing is being felt not only in Canada, in the United States, in Europe, in Thailand, in Australia, and all the other 12 markets you have served. So keep doing what you're doing. Hopefully we can have you on again next year, and talk to you later, Stephanie. Thanks again so much for your time.
Thanks, Ray. Have a good one.
Yeah.
Bye.